Amen. May we rise. Father, we come to you this day in the name of Jesus Christ. Holy Spirit of God, we call upon your holy name, Abba Father. Have your way in this conference. Lord, we want to say thank you for all the delegates that you have brought for this conference from far and near. Lord, we want to say thank you for those that you put to organize this conference. Holy Spirit, as we go into deliberation, Father, we call upon your holy name. Have your way. Have your way, Lord. Lead us, guide us, direct us. Let each word that we speak come from you. Lord, we call upon you to bless every speaker that will stand here today to speak. Lord, that the words that are going to come out of here are going to be words that are going to touch your people and free them from any bondage that they have been held captive. Holy Spirit of God, we cry and call upon your holy name. Abba Father, there is nothing we can do without you. And that is why we as your own children, this morning, we are calling upon you that, Father, take over everything that we shall be doing from this moment onward. In the mighty name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
There is a saying that I'm very fond of, and I wanted to share with you. Those of the legal profession will find this interesting or will relate with it. And it says, equity aids the vigilant, not the indolent. And then equity will not suffer any wrong to be right. So at this moment, I'd like to call on someone who certainly is vigilant, certainly seeks equity, and does not and will not suffer any wrong to be right. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is none other than Dr. Fontem Neba, who I am so sure and certain many of you are looking forward to hearing just what road he has traveled to be here and to set perhaps the major objectives for this conference today and what we hope to achieve. So without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, give him a resounding welcome. Dr. Fontem.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Southern Cameroonians, it is with a mixture of pride and humility that I welcome you to the All Southern Cameroon's People's Conference. I'm proud of our common resolve to address the issues that plague our collective existence as a people within a defined territory and with a history, and humbled by the task of seeking peace and justice in the face of blistering adversity that has befallen our homeland. On behalf of the steering committee of this conference, I wish to tell our fellow citizens who have come from all over the United States, China, France, Britain, South Africa, Canada, Nigeria, and Cameroon, that the journey you have made to this place must not be in vain. It is a historic moment and the chance of a lifetime to critically reflect on the road taken so far and the calamity that has befallen our homeland. I am also thankful to the people on the world stage, many of whom have taken interest in this conference and taken time off their busy schedules to apprise themselves in a more in-depth way of the political and moral issues of the Southern Cameroon's predicament. Our people are peace-loving, God-fearing, hard-working, industrious, dedicated, and committed to the cause of ensuring that this conference will not end like any other one. Today we gather on the threshold of history to chart the future of Southern Cameroons 60 years after the historic conference of Manfi, where our forefathers took the decisive step to pursue the independence of Southern Cameroons. In 1959, after they pulled out of the Eastern House of Assembly in Nigeria, our forebears wanted an independent country of their own, where the hardship and the suffering they had previously experienced will no longer exist. They idealized democracy, human rights, and political freedom, and for the most part, our people looked forward to that and a bright future. They were, however, unsuspecting, and thus were soon saddled with choices which would eventually truncate the very dreams that had caused them to pull out of Nigeria. When it was time, Southern Cameroons was given the option of either obtaining independence by joining Nigeria or La République du Cameroon. In the absence of a third option and hoodwinked into an illegal plebiscite by the United Nations trustee, Southern Cameroons would jump into a fire which 59 years later has become a conflagration, which is decimating human lives, inflicting misery, and has unleashed a humanitarian catastrophe. How we found ourselves in a country so far away from our ideals is an accident of history, which we must now collectively seek to redress. But this must be done peacefully and within the frame of the same international law that has been the bane of our own freedom. The point we must focus on right now is our people's desire to be free from the shackles of oppression. As we gather here in Washington, D.C., we must not lose sight of the changes that time may bring. We must not lose sight of the fact that our people have suffered and are still suffering in the hands of an oppressive government of Cameroon. And so, in searching for common ground as a solution to the bloody conflict in our homeland, we must logically choose an option which will never again take us to war. But for us to take such a decision, we must look back and see how we got here and where the signs and what the signs we neglected were. This should guide us to drive for peace and spare future generations the kind of carnage we have experienced in the last 2 years. We must recall that after 32 years of a slurred and humiliating existence, during which we were officially called Anglo-fools, the enemy in the house, or Biafrans, and the defensive and the derisive treatment in political and economic life, our people met at the All Anglophone Conference in Buea and Bamenda, respectively, and resolved that it was time for the government of Cameroon to return to the federal system agreed upon when Southern Cameroons gained independence in 1961. Noting, however, that the scrapping of the federation was an illegality which needed to be redressed. They promised the government of Cameroon that if, within a specified time, the federal system was not reinstated, the people of Southern Cameroons will seek to obtain independence. This became necessary because our people watched their dreams vanish before their own eyes, as they were gradually subjugated and pushed to the fringes of their supposedly brotherly country. Today, these declassified cables show that the world was aware that granting us independence by joining Cameroon was an explosive cocktail, but nothing was done to avert it. My fellow citizens, today we are as diverse in our thinking and political orientation as our forefathers when they went to Mamfe in 1959 and later during the AAC 1 and 2. In Mamfe, some of them wanted to join Nigeria. Others felt that La République du Cameroun would be better. And a more dominant group felt that Southern Cameroon would be better off standing on its own. However, the only difference now is that our different opinions find it difficult to cohabit in spite of our collective experience. This must stop. We must begin to rally around the cause of our suffering. We must unite around these problems that have bedeviled our existence and focus more on the end, not on the process. The war which is raging in southern Cameroon started as a simple, peaceful teachers and lawyers protest and fledged into an uprising. The usual tactics of brutality were employed to drive the protest to the level at which it is now. We must also recall that some of our forefathers warned against this kind of brutality when we were joining the Republic of Cameroon. And they made it clear that we were going into a relationship where life did not have any value. We watched how the Bamilekes were decimated. We watched how the Bassas were decimated and how entire neighborhoods were burnt because they had dissidents. And children, women, and whole families were consumed by fire. Today, we have become the new target, and our lives are no longer as they were. In the midst of the brutal crackdown and indiscriminate killing, Southern Cameroon's defense groups emerged to fight back the brutality exacted on the communities. In December 2017, President Paul Biya declared war on the people, and ever since it has become a civil war. This declaration unleashed extreme violence on the communities, with government soldiers scorching more than 200 villages. More than 5,000 civilians have so far been killed, and in the last 1 month, one community alone in Banso lost 289 people. We have about 60,000 people officially recorded as living in refugee camps and more than 800,000 internally displaced persons. The numbers of people in forests have not been established, and many more figures come up daily, with some organizations trying to downplay the scale of the problem, and we wonder why. This war has literally destroyed the lives of our people, with schools, businesses, and social life paralyzed. Numerous militias now rule our backyard and the countryside, many of which are backed by an angry diaspora and some by the government of the Republic of Cameroon, which is determined to create a bad image of the people's resistance. Some of these groups kidnap for huge ransoms and enforce lockdowns. On the other hand, the military raids, kills civilians, scorches villages, burns hospitals and kills patients with impunity. In the midst of the violence, the government continues to exacerbate public anger, shunning dialogue, while hoping to subdue the people through its violent campaign of mass murder. The All-Anglophone General Conference by Cardinal Toomey, convened by Cardinal Christian Toomey, to discuss the so-called Anglophone problem and speak to them, was not permitted. It has not been permitted, and we doubt if it will ever be permitted, because the government fears dialogue. The government does not want the people of Southern Cameroon to express themselves at any time. As a result, the conference has been postponed twice, while the toll of civilian casualties continues to mount. Even the measures taken by the government, which they believe are meant to stave off the pressure from the international community, are only intended to buy time. The National Commission for the Promotion of Bilingualism does not in any way ensure equality of the people in the affected regions. The National Disarmament Campaign is just about putting the cart before the horse. There is therefore an urgent need for a peaceful solution that must start by bringing all Southern Cameroonians together as stakeholders at home and abroad in the diaspora to chart by consensus the manner in which our people can seek justice. In this regard, fellow citizens, this conference has brought us together so that we can identify the issues that have plagued our existence since we obtained independence by joining La République du Cameroon in 1961. We should be able to review the social, economic, and political issues which are often perceived as simple grievances, but actually are instruments, mechanisms, and strategies that the government put in place to ensure that we were properly assimilated and that the phagocytic process was completed by a certain time. 60 years later, we must look at it and see why it must not continue. We need to also look at the escalation and the loss of property and life. This conference seeks to evaluate the measures that have been taken so far to ensure that the solutions, that adequate or proper solutions are given to the issues that have formed the thrust of the Southern Cameroon's revolt. And with what success? We also will be ascertaining the nature and the extent of the humanitarian crisis resulting from the burning of villages, hospitals, and how refugees and internally displaced persons can be integrated in the overall drive for this peace that we all seek. We should realize that for us to chart the path to a sustainable peace, we must consider that Southern Cameroonians must seek a solution that will never again take them to war. Southern Cameroonians must seek a solution that will never again cause them to shed tears the way we have shed tears this season. And we cannot achieve that if we don't agree on the issues that plague our lives as a people. One of the things that has bothered us collectively has been the internal wrangling and often very painful divisions that have characterized the life of the leadership of most of the organizations, institutions, and groups that have dominated the struggle for the freedom of our homeland. This conference seeks to reconcile Southern Cameroon's political groups and rally them around the cause of their people, outlining the code of conduct which will govern political activities before, during, and after we would have successfully sought and obtained justice for our people. Ladies and distinguished ladies and gentlemen, fellow citizens, on my own, I do not have the capacity to be able to achieve this, but we can only do it as a people, collectively. That is why we have branded this conference the People's Conference. We, the people, must speak. We expect that we will be able to achieve heightened international awareness of the conflict, which has often been treated in the media simply as an Anglophone problem, a name used to dilute our identity. It is a war that has become genocidal. The international community needs to take action to avert the unfolding of another Rwanda in the Central African region. We should be able to develop a common strategy for peace within a viable framework for a long-term solution and the role the international community can play within that framework. We should finally be able to reconcile our leaders, the different groups, and with all their ideological leanings towards a common and consensus position. The point we are making is that many as we are, diverse as we are, we have one common position. Southern Cameroon has had enough. Let us not shy away from some of the factors that have made our quest for freedom impracticable. In the past few months, we have witnessed with indignation social media wars, denigration, the spread of false information, all with the aim of bringing down, slandering, or stalling a legitimate quest. Our people must realize that disruptive competition has no place anymore in this quest for freedom. As I was coming, to this conference, I got a call from the refugees. And many of them said, Dr. Fontem, please, you people need to do something for us. We have had enough. People are dying of hunger, of starvation. Our people are a hard-working people who have often fed themselves from the produce of their farms. But today, our people can no longer go to their farms. Today, our people are hiding in bushes, in the forest, and the army of occupation pursues them right into those forests, and we have seen horrific murders and assassinations carried out in those forests. My fellow citizens, we must all rise up in unity and in strength and put an end to this wicked cycle that has plagued our people. We have a homeland with a defined border, with a territory that has been measured and recorded. But we have one duty. Today and tomorrow will be defining moments in our lives as a people. I want to thank my fellow citizens who embrace this ideal of a conference. I want to thank my fellow citizens who embraced this ideal of a conference and who gave their support for the logistics that enabled us to be able to sit here. I believe that their commitment and their dedication should serve as an example to those who have lost faith and courage. We must all come back and work collectively, constructively, and peacefully to be able to achieve something good for our people. I also want to thank the leaders of the frontline liberation movements who, in spite of the difficulties, media glare, pervasive cynicism, insisted and maintained that they will be part of this meeting and that they will give their views and defend their positions. Can we please thank them for it? On our part, as a collective of people, we ask of you that you will do what is pleasing to God. You will do what will honor our people so that the pain we are going through will come to an end. I also want to thank my friends, whom I will not specify, for their good advice, for the ideas they gave me, and the interest that they have taken in this conflict. We believe that with their help, this crisis will not fester like other crises that have decimated populations in Africa. I always like to remember the words of Aldous Huxley, who says the ultimate test of every man's conscience must be his willingness to do things for future generations whose words of thanks may never be heard. Let us do things for our children and our children's children. This conference, I want to believe, is one of rededication, redefinition, and rediscovery. Thank you very much.